thank you for putting your screen image on. I guess that's a requirement, if I'm understanding now, going forward with the open meeting laws. Is that correct,
Yeah,
Diana?
that's right, Alice.
Okay, so do put your meeting on if you are a member of the committee and want to get credit, as it were. All right, so I just want to say something before we get started, which is, and I could say this with tears in my own eyes, cannot believe that we are going to lose Diana Sweetai, our Director of Planning, from the board. I'm sure you all are aware of this, and though she is moving on to EDC, for better or worse, I might add for the record, I am delighted for her. I'm sure we all are. It's an extraordinary position she's stepping into, and her contribution on this board, well before we've had anything to do with the leadership of it, has been extraordinary. We have butt heads years ago, and we have been friends over issues, and we have really explored things together. And I feel really privileged to have had someone like you in our lives for these last years. So all I can say is a huge, heartfelt thank you to Diana, and you better stay in touch. And, you know, lucky them.
Alice, you won't be able to get rid of me. Something that was really important to me was to be able to continue working on the things that I have been, and a big piece of that is resiliency for Lower Manhattan. So you may see me back here as early as July to continue working on these things. So while I am leaving, I am not going very far, and I'm sure you'll see me all the time. But many board members I've worked with for my whole 10 years here, and I can't speak highly enough of all of you and the work particularly that this committee has done. And I'm really excited that we can continue working on that together.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that, and many thanks. I hope there'll be a rip-roaring party at some point in the not too distant future. Anyway, back to work. Yeah, we're going to have a 250 Water Street brownfield cleanup program update by our fearless leader, Laura Dodge, who is on the phone here today because she has other things to do. Imagine that, which kind of coincided with this. So that seemed fine. And so, Laura, take it away, and thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First off, congratulations, Diana. I don't know. I've never known CB without you, so this will be new world, but hopefully we'll cross paths again. You do a lot of work in the city, so I'm sure we'll see you. But congratulations to you. So where we are. So after the working group meeting where, you know, DEC, DOH, Langen, HEC, the community consultants gave an update, we, you know, fielded as many questions as we could. Langen and HEC went back to work. They're working on what will be an addendum to the remediation work plan. DEC has actually requested and required them to actually submit a document that will memorialize the changes to the camp that they've asked for. Technically speaking, the way that the agencies described the changes at the working group meeting, they actually said that these really aren't camp modifications, they're more means and methods modifications. But apparently in subsequent discussions between the agencies and Langen and HEC after the call, or after the working group meeting, they are actually asking for an updated camp and an RWP remediation work plan addendum. The timing of that should be very shortly because the current schedule for Langen HEC to proceed with the work is Tuesday, the 28th of June is when the contractor is supposed to start initiating activities. Now, the work will start with likely moving the fence out, bumping the fence out slightly to allow them the sufficient room they need because they're excavating pretty much curb to curb inside the property. They do need a DOT permit for the Pearl Street side because they're looking to expand or extend the fence into part of the street in order to allow for a lane to provide for equipment deliveries and materials deliveries. You know, not uncommon in the city, but they need a DOT permit for that. If they get the DOT permit for the 28th, then they may begin to move the fence prior to the 28th. But right now, it's not clear that they'll get the permit before that. So the work that will be starting, as we've all discussed before, is, you know, the mercury impacted soil excavation and the underground storage tank removal and the petroleum impacted soil removal. These are really two separate areas of concern on the site, but they are included in a high priority excavation that is going to be done first to be able to get these materials out of the site. They'll start with the mercury impacted soil excavation, you know, the hot spot along Keck Slip, and then extend that down to the depths that are necessary based on the remediation work plan. And those are going to be variable, but they do go past the 8-foot depth, Alice, as you know. So there will be archaeological monitoring required during that activity. And then they'll be going even deeper as they go towards the Peck Slip Water Street corner to take out the underground storage tanks and the petroleum impacted soil in that area going towards that corner. So the general activity is expected to take about 10 weeks, which means that right now, if the work starts and they mobilize the week of June 28th, it would extend essentially through September 2nd. That's a 10-week period. Now, I should say also that prior to the full excavation starting, they have to do the supportive excavation activity. You know, they have to provide the shoring and support for the excavation sidewalls because they are going down, you know, right up to the curb. And that right now was a soldier pile installation. And what we know is that they're looking at, you know, quieter means of pile installation. What we don't know yet, because we haven't seen the revised or the REWP addendum, we don't know exactly what the where everything came out in terms of the methods that they're using. They are looking at, you know, noise reducing techniques for those piles. The other changes to the remediation work plan involve the means and methods that were talked about at the working group. Very briefly, those would include covering the excavation at the end of the workday and before going into a weekend with a combination of either foam that is intended to reduce the emission of odors or vapors or dust, coupled with plastic sheeting. Depending upon the size of the excavation and how feasible it is to use plastic sheeting, they're going to have to be determining, you know, the combination of the two of those things. But one way or the other, they need to cover the open excavation at the end of the workday and before the weekend starts. So these things will be explained in more detail in this REWP supplement or addendum that DEC is indicating that we will be provided, myself and Tom Facillo, on behalf of the community so that we can provide input to it. I don't have a timeline for that because they're still working on it, but I would imagine it'll come, you know, as soon as humanly possible to give us enough time to review it in advance of any of the work starting. And then there's changes to, you know, other aspects of the work with respect to the odor suppressing sleeves that are going to be used on the inside of the fence. And these sleeves are, we have the information from Langen regarding what's in the foam and also what's in the sleeves. And basically the foam is a biodegradable foam. It's safe for use. We can provide the backup, and it will be in the REWP addendum, but I can provide that information to CB1 if you want to distribute it to the community. The sleeves are basically sleeves that contain a granule that contains essential oils that help reduce any, you know, nuisance odor, and that's what they're essentially designed to do. And they hang on the inside of the fence line. Is everyone hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just want to check in because I'm actually in, and I'm still driving because I'm on my way to an event. So I just don't want to be talking and then realizing that I lost everyone.
No,
So
no.
anyway, so the other changes to the camp that we talked about at the working group meeting, involve, Langen's evaluation of whether or not the mercury vapor analyzer that's, currently being used to wire into the camp systems and get, continuous data recorded and sent to a server so that they get alerts, on a, real-time basis, whether that instrument can be replaced with the J505 and still be wired in. We don't know the outcome of that evaluation yet. They were talking to a vendor. They were going to do some evaluation of whether or not that's going to be feasible. We'll find out, as soon as the updated RWP addendum and revised camp is provided. If that isn't going to be possible, then the agencies and Langen and Howard Hughes are all aware of the fact that, there's a concern over the reliability of the J405, the fact that it does have a tendency to have interference readings, and it also has a tendency to have, malfunctions based upon the fact that it's being, put into a service that is extremely difficult for any instrument to maintain reliability. A very long day, and this is a problem that we have in our industry, trying to have instruments that are going to be continuously operating, all day long, from the time they're set up to the time that they're taken down, which in some cases could be 10 hours. They're going to need to accommodate those concerns, either by having additional instruments above and beyond what were originally specified in the camp, and supplementing them with handheld J505s that might actually be set up next to the camp units in a mode that would enable them to be stationary and continuously monitoring. That data can be compared apples to apples, if you will, to the J405 data. Whatever combination of alternatives, there's been a number of things discussed. They're going to come back with what it is that they're proposing, and then we'll have an opportunity to comment on that. And we recognize that the community is extremely concerned about the reliability of the monitoring, as are we, Tom Facil and I, and as are the agencies. And so I think the dialogue has been productive in trying to come up with a way to ensure that those concerns are addressed and that we get reliable data through monitoring that's useful and appropriate, given what the concerns are and the issues are at hand. So there were other changes that were talked about. I don't know if I need to go through all of those with this group or not, but
I think so.
One thing I did want to mention is that Ricky Wong from Howard Hughes had sent out a notice that everybody should have received already about them moving in a large load of construction equipment tomorrow morning very early, because they need to move it in per the city requirements. I think they're starting to do that at 6 a.m. tomorrow, just to as a reminder to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's just moving equipment in. There's no work being done, no intrusive activities, therefore no air quality monitoring. They're just basically, moving the large load, onto the site. So just wanted to remind people about that.
Thanks, Laura. Before, I know you have limited time, but before I open to the questions, I just want to ask, when would be the logical time you'll come back to the board to update us? And would that be after the next working group, 250 BCP working group meeting?
Well, right now what's happening is that this 10-week schedule that I was just provided today, the confirmation from Langen that that's the duration of the next activity. We're putting together a work scope for the independent community monitor scope to provide assistance to the community during that time. Obviously, when the mercury impacted soil area asphalt is removed is going to be one of those times where, we would want to make sure that the community is comfortable, that we have a little bit of redundancy in the air monitoring, because the work that we're doing is really confirming air quality outside of the fence line. assuming that you want us to proceed with that, then we're preparing now that we finally have the schedule and we know the 10-week time frame is what they're working towards. We're going to prepare that, and that would then include additional time for us to be involved in the working group meetings and then provide updates, at this meeting.
So let me open it up to questions for the board members that are here today and the committee members. Is there anybody who has questions? For those of you who are new to this, I realized I should have prefaced this by saying this is Laura Dodge is our independent consultant for those new members who haven't met her before, who's working on specifically a brownfield cleanup site at 250 Water Street in the South Street Airport area. And, this is very similar. I know some of you following the jail very closely. This is something that we'd like to see for the review of the jail, construction. So anyway, there's a tie-in a little bit here. And we, of course, as you know, have asked for an independent monitor for that. In any case, let's open it up. Anybody have questions? Okay, I see Richard Corman. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, everyone. And Laura, thanks so much for this as always. I really appreciate the detail that you've given us, but I was hoping you could just help some of those that can't follow all of that detail. Are you, just in the simplest of terms for us, aside from the reliability of the equipment that you just mentioned, do you have any concerns, and should we have any concerns about any aspect of the project now, be it what the findings have been, the protection that's in place, the oversight that's in place, and even possibly the schedule as it relates to the school year coming back in?
Great
Well,
question.
let me address the schedule issue first, because that's probably the easiest. From my point of view right now, the focus has been, and Howard Hughes had agreed, that the mercury impacted soil excavation and the underground storage tank excavation, where there's petroleum impacted soils and therefore the potential for odors to be generated and possibly volatile organics, but that work be done while school's out. So they did revise the schedule to enable that to proceed, and assuming all goes well, they'll be done before school starts up again in the fall. There's not a lot of leeway in this schedule. I think it really is going to be necessary and very important, that they're really ready and all of their equipment is prepped, and they've got troubleshooting of the equipment going in, so that they don't have to shut things down because of equipment malfunction. So the first activity, the 421A excavation, most of what occurred there were hiccups due to, some contractor miscommunication with really what they needed to be focusing on the environmental front and on the noise generation front. And those issues have been corrected. Langen, the contractor, Howard Hughes, most importantly, recognized that they need to, going into this next activity, need to have all those issues completely corrected, and the contractor fully aware that their noise reduction technique approach and the focus on that and doing things in a manner that are really cognizant of the fact that you've got all these community members immediately adjacent to the site. So the emphasis is going to be much more on trying to get ahead of those things. So there were a few hiccups with the procedural aspects of washing down the truck tires. They were right at the very beginning of excavation of soil during the 421A activities, and they were corrected immediately upon identification that they weren't fully adhering to the remediation work plan. So I think the message is very, very loud and clear now for the entire project team, that those things cannot be repeated, and that's why there's so much emphasis and focus, I think, on the procedural aspects, the means and methods. So when it came to the actual data that was generated during that 421A activity, the mercury action level, which is the level at which the work would, if it gets exceeded, the work would stop on site and an evaluation be conducted of what's going on. Why are we finding, 1 microgram per cubic meter of mercury vapor or more? On a 15-minute time-weighted average basis, not on an instantaneous reading basis. And that's really an important point, because the action level is not a health risk-based level. It's a level that's set much lower than the health risk-based level to enable everyone to stop and act. And the action is to stop the work and then investigate what's going on, and if necessary, use best management practices to minimize any actual mercury vapor issue going forward in the work. Meaning, determine whether or not the Mercon X was the foam to minimize mercury vapor, or the Astros foam, which is used to minimize petroleum vapor, needs to be used. Going forward into this next activity, DEC's taken that a step farther. They've actually asked that the Mercon X be used proactively, right in the beginning, right as they start the peeling up of the asphalt, right as they start the excavation and the disruption of the soil. So the changes to the REWP and the camp are designed to be more proactive to prevent any issue. So what we saw in the data before, to me it reflects the fact that we know that there's mercury in the system out there, but we didn't see anything that rose to a level of an adverse human health risk. We reached, and in some cases, the data from the J405, the instrument that's tied into the camp, that indicated that the action level was periodically reached or exceeded. On the 15-minute time-weighted average, it was only a few times that occurred. But the work in every instance shut down, if it wasn't already shut down, and the appropriate actions and steps were taken. The troubleshooting of the instrument is something that's a necessary step in the performance of this kind of work. And I think going into this, it will continue, and there'll be backup instruments like there were during the 421A excavation activity, but perhaps a few more of those. Again, it's yet to be seen in terms of exactly how they're going to address that concern. If they're going to be, tying in the J505, the instrument that has lower sensitivity and is perhaps a little bit better in this kind of an application, or if they're going to be able to, use a different approach. So either way, we'll look at it, and we'll be comfortable going into this activity. And we'll be monitoring it, as will the DEC and DOH.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I don't know if I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
Did that get to the heart of the matter, Richard, for you?
I think if I summarize it, just tell me if I'm correct, that
Okay.
there were some observations and some issues that raised concerns that you have been addressing, and you believe, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but you believe that the changes that have been implemented address the concerns that were raised, and that at the moment, at least, you feel comfortable that you're able to manage the situation as you see it coming forward. That plus, but what you also said, I think, was that the schedule is very tight, and that could be a real concern for us if, in fact, it slips and we start to get into the school year. Is that kind of a reasonable summary of what you were saying?
Yeah, it's a reasonable summary. The only caveat is that we have not yet seen the revised, the REWP addendum. So I have to say that based on all of my conversations with the agencies and with Langen, I expect that the changes that we see in those documents will be addressing our concerns satisfactorily. But until I see those, I can't be 100% sure. But, our work is designed to provide the agency's feedback if we get something that we think is not where it ought to be. So, but I am confident that this process, as it moves forward, is going to get us there.
Well, that's good,
Great.
good to hear, to say the least. Okay, I'm going to ask Noah Reinhardt, who I see has a hand up.
everyone, and thanks. This is Noah Reinhardt. I'm the head of school at Blue School, and appreciate you holding this conversation. I wanted to follow up on the last piece that Richard summarized just a moment ago, which is about the tightness of the schedule for the summer and the potential possibility of the remediation work needing to continue into the fall. I feel very good, obviously, that the most potentially hazardous work is scheduled to happen while school is out, both at Blue School and at Peck Slip around the corner. But it makes me nervous to think about the possibility that if this schedule isn't able to be maintained, there would be the wish to continue the remediation work into the fall. So my question is a general question. I don't know who could, if anyone could answer it, but is the recourse if the schedule isn't able to be met and there is the wish to continue remediation work into the fall?
I mean, what I can tell you for sure is based on all my conversations with the agencies in Langen and Howard Hughes, they're going to be doing everything in their power to ensure that they meet that schedule. The problem with all of this kind of work is always that, there can be unforeseen, subsurface conditions. I mean, anytime you're excavating, that's always a possibility. So I think all efforts are going to be made to complete the work before school resumes. In the event as the work proceeds, it looks like that's not going to be the case, then there will be obviously very active discussions as to what will be done. And I can't speak to right now what the reasonable alternatives are given the magnitude of the effort. If the work could only be done after hours or on weekends, depends on what's remaining to be done. But I can tell you that, that's one of the reasons why, we'll continue to be actively involved so that we can provide, this kind of input as the work does proceed. It's important, and I know that Langen and Howard Hughes completely 100% understand that to give it the best foot forward, they have to have everything ready, all the instruments ready, all their best means and methods, worked out. And then, and I know that they know that without a doubt. I mean, that this is really important to them to get done in that time frame. So, we'll be monitoring it as the work proceeds and providing, our insights, myself and Tom Pasillo. And if there's an indication that, it isn't going to be done in that time frame, then obviously there'll be continued dialogue as to next steps. I'm just not in a position right now to say exactly what those would be.
Yeah, thank you, Laura and Noah, for the question. It's an important one, and we certainly will be watching carefully. Just to keep in mind, we also have impressed upon all those involved that these working group meetings have to happen a lot more frequently than they were and be scheduled, religiously once a month at minimum, and as well as Laura's updates to the community as is needed. So thank you. Are there any other questions?
If I could just add,
oh,
I'm sorry, if I could add one more comment just as a follow-up to Noah's comment. The one thing I can say, though, just is for each activity that has been implemented to date in terms of the overall RI activities, the 421A activities, they did complete within their scheduled time frame. The only thing they had to do additionally was go back out and do a few more soil borings for the waste characterization activity, but that's not uncommon, and that was based upon the disposal facility asking for more data. But when they had a scheduled field activity like a geotechnical investigation, it was conducted and completed actually ahead of their schedule. When they did the 421A, it was completed ahead of their deadline, their worst case scenario time frame. So I think what they have demonstrated obviously is that they can, and are devising a schedule that's realistic and they're meeting it. So, in the sense in terms of, the odds of them, bringing this to completion are better, knowing that they've been able to bring previous phases of work to completion in their time frames that they've predicted.
Thanks, Laura. Are there any other questions? The only other thing that I would like to share is we did receive from Adam Meister the archaeological monitoring report that we asked for that's been promised to us. And I'll just summarize it. This will be on, as with, of course, all of these meetings are recorded on YouTube, so they're easily listened to. And then all of the paperwork, as it were, is housed at the bcp.com site, and anything that's concerning the community board's responses and such is housed at the in the getting the category, Diana, help me out here, in the CB1 site under external documents. That's right.
Yeah, and I just shared a link to the report that you're referencing in the chat.
Okay, great. And I will just say for the record here that according to Elizabeth Mead, who's the archaeological monitor for the site on behalf of AKRF, the firm that's representing Howard Hughes in this work, the results of the monitoring, and I'll quote here, no archaeological resources were observed during the course of the archaeological monitoring associated with the construction of the cap pile. Within the excavated area, brick rubble with modern demolition debris was observed to the depth of approximately 12 to 16 feet. This continues, then I add, overall, the excavated soils contain low levels of artifacts, none of which appear to be in association with historical fill deposits or to have extensive research value. Not sure how they make that determination, but such is the determination. A total of 5 artifacts was collected. 3 of these were waterborne chert rocks, which were recovered from wet sandy soils. While chert was commonly used for the production of Native American stone tools, the 3 objects do not appear to exhibit obvious signs of having been worked by human hands and may therefore be naturally occurring. And it goes on for a few more details which are of interest. And its conclusion is simple. In the limited area that was excavated to a depth of approximately 19 feet below the ground surface, no intact archaeological resources were observed. Excavation across the larger site below the depth of previous basement disturbance would provide archaeologists with better opportunities to observe archaeological resources. So, you know, it's an interesting point to say that it's that no intact resources were observed. I'm not sure exactly how to sort of grapple with what that means, but I assume that if anything of consequence comes up, we will know about it. And that will, of course, for better and for worse, be of interest, but also could potentially derail the schedule a tad. So I did want to make sure we shared that report. So far, nothing. And that will be also part of the working group's monthly prize mix. So that's it on that agenda item. So believe it or not, unless anyone has any questions, we are done with our agenda, but I did write this committee, you know, just because we had additional time, whether or not anyone wanted to offer up, because it's so rare that we have additional time, suggestions for thoughts that they have for topics that you'd like on behalf of the community you believe would be worthwhile to cover going forward as we approach the fall, sooner than we would probably like. Anybody want to share that? And of course, these can be, we will write these down and, you know, can work with them, but just as a kind of open conversation. Oh, great. I see a lot of hands up. So Jeff Galloway.
Okay. This isn't in direct answer to your question, but it's kind of related to it. As a preliminary thing on that zero carbon zoning, which I think does look interesting, hopefully we can get an actual copy of the zoning text amendment proposal. We have the press releases, and I Googled around. I couldn't find the actual text amendment. And of course,
No.
as we know, details make a difference.
No, I agree. It doesn't exist yet, I don't think. I'm not sure it's actually been
Yeah,
written.
that's correct. I spoke to city planning about that this week, actually, to ask where exactly they were in those citywide zoning text amendments. They're in the early stages and they're still working on it, which is good because we have time to engage, and I'm setting up a meeting, a briefing with city planning before the end of this month, so we could talk about those kinds of things. But I believe the business, the zoning related to small businesses and economic development is coming up first. They are not coming all at once, thank God. So we'll find out more information, but no, it is not available yet.
Okay.
It's great timing for us all to get involved with the question, I think, because it hasn't been written. We actually maybe could even influence something there. I don't know. But with our council members' support and all, if it's a text amendment, we're going to hopefully have a say here. So it'll be really helpful to hear from someone about it globally. Where I was very interested, just so you all know, was, and I don't know if you are aware, but in London, I'm not sure if I shared this with everyone. There was a demolition of a proposed demolition of a very important building in downtown London called Marks and Spencer department store, and actually there were groups that stopped the mayor Sadiq Khan from the demolition originally of this building, claiming that it wasn't really adhering to the city's laws on and regulations considered for sustainability. And they kind of went with that argument for a while. I think in the end, the building will come down, but it was a very interesting one. And people had been talking about, different organizations that I've been in touch with, talking about, well, what if there was actual legislation that looked at ways to actually assess what the impacts are of demolishing a building and constructing a new one. And this certainly comes to mind in the case of a lot of the work that we're seeing in all of our neighborhood parks, in addition to the jail and many other things that go on in Lower Manhattan. So I thought that was a worthwhile thing for us to consider.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, well, that answers my question there. The other thing I was just going to comment on, and it kind of turns back to the town hall. And it's not so much a subject to address, but a way of addressing subjects. We're going to be doing other resiliency projects, whether it's North Battery Park City or FIDI or Seaport. All of these plans, whatever plans are ultimately decided upon in these areas, are likely to be disruptive, very disruptive to the neighborhoods, either during construction or after they're done, or both. And I think we kind of owe it to ourselves and our community to make sure that we communicate to the community timely, use as a lesson learned. I mean, I think we did communicate well on South BPC with lots of public hearings and public notice and whatever, but obviously there were a whole slew of people that didn't know about it nonetheless. So I think we need to exercise our brains to figure out, going forward on the other projects, how can we communicate even better than before?
Here, Jeff. I have soul searched on this one, as you can imagine, Diana and I, particularly over 6 years, not to have had the kind of input that we received yesterday at that town hall is, really disturbing and unfortunate and understandable completely. And I think one of the things that we need to urge, and whether it be by resolution or simply a lot of loud voices, is that the applicant themselves, it really takes responsibility to make that their case known of exactly what they're doing and when. And I remember even 6 years ago, we often asked, did the Battery Park City Authority reach all the residents of the building? And that was always a bit of an open question. And I guess the answer is clearly not. So, I'm all ears. We should all work on ways to make that happen. I mean, it would be really important. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, Richard Corman. You're on mute, Richard, I think.
Sorry. Now I can't remember anything that I was going to say. Oh, no, not true. Good. First of all, I need to say, Diana, we're going to miss you terribly. Really, you've been invaluable here, and we're kind of pretty upset with you for leaving, frankly. So,
Thank you, Richard.
You've really been great, and truly, I don't know how we're going to replace you. And I also want to say, in a slightly different vein, Wendy, you were terrific yesterday. I know it was so heartfelt. It was very moving. Maybe not everybody who was watching understood that, but we've seen you fight this fight for so long. It was a very powerful statement. So greatly appreciated, truly. So I just was thinking, sort of really more off the top of my head on these issues, but let me just share a couple of thoughts for whatever they have. So in no particular order. I think it's time for us, and this is probably the most difficult one to solve, and we may never solve it in our lifetimes, probably not. But the combined sewage overflow issue, I think, is an enormous environmental issue. And somehow it's so large, but we've got to start to look at it sometime in some way, shape, or form. So that's one. Kind of the almost flip side of that, easier, is recycling. I think recycling plays an important part in our environment, and we're just not doing it well at all in this city and probably not in this country. A third, conversion of the old building stock. This, I think, could have an enormous beneficial impact on our environment. And it's obviously something that by law, we're all going to have to address. But I think people out there really just have no clue what to do at this point. And I think a lot of buildings are going to start to face fines in the next few years, but they also don't have a plan. And maybe we can start to build a plan, look into the technologies that could be used in older building stock that in a city like ours. And then the flip side of that, and we know that we've been hearing a lot about this from some of our committee members, but new building standards. What are the new building standards and what kind of role can we play in establishing them? What kinds of buildings should we be building in our city, and how can we move it towards a better environmental impact? And the zero carbon is right in that, obviously, right in that wheelhouse. And then lastly, I was thinking about, we talk about this a lot in the resiliency measures, like cisterns and all of that, but I wonder if we could kind of look at that as its own subject. Other more natural resiliency measures that the city could start to implement. Porous streets, cisterns, like I said, more trees, whatever it might be. Push harder for more parkland and open space, which solves multiple problems. So those are my thoughts for an agenda for next year.
And terrific they are. And, well noted. And we are, that one that covers all the DOB requirements is something that's kind of ties in with the carbon assessment. And so we're looking for speakers on that, which I think will be some really good ones I'm hoping to nail down. So those are terrific. Thanks a lot, Richard. Wendy, how about you? See your hand up there.
Yeah, Richard, I just want to say great minds, because you took a few of my ideas, but I might say them again in a slightly different way, but I think they come under the same people coming to speak. But I wrote on here that the buildings are getting ratings. My building is a D. And so I still don't know what that means exactly in terms of what I'm supposed to do about it. I know that I don't like getting a D on my report card. So it's embarrassing that every time I walk in my building, it has a D, and I'm on the environmental committee. So my guess is it's the same organization that you're talking about, but I'm kind of explaining to the residents what they're supposed to do about it. Because we're starting to get, like, you're getting judged, but you don't know exactly what you can do about it. So on the same note, I had also that I would like to invite the sanitation department in to speak about all the things they're doing. So like one of the things that I stumbled across a few years ago is something called the Stop and Swap, which is basically like a free exchange pop-up for a day. And Pace University taps into this, but I think we should promote doing more of these stop and swaps in our neighborhood, in Community Board 1. But that's probably just one thing that the Department of Sanitation is running, that's to keep things out of the landfill and innovations. And I would love to, my guess is they're so big, they don't even know all the programs they have. So to your point, composting is one of them. I also went, when we went on the tour of the Battery Park City, how they do their composting, I learned about their dog composting, their dog poop program. And it's pretty amazing and impressive. And, they have a sign on their, one of their dog runs down there about how much poop they keep out of the landfill. I like more metrics around more educational things. So like if we could create programs and then put signage out about what the program is and how it's helping the New York. And I mean, I just want to, I think a lot of things are being done. This was my criticism of of a lot of things that Battery Park did, is that, the communication about what's being done around the city. I'd ask the Department of Sanitation too, like, tell us more about what you're doing. It just, I mean, maybe it goes back to we're all getting our news from such a decentralized way now. I think we need to physically put signs up in our neighborhood to educate the public, or, to get the word out. So anyway, that's one thought. I also think that the city is doing a lot of solar and wind programs where they're trying to put solar and do collective, things. I'd love to know more about what that means. And the restaurant huts, or whatever we call that, the restaurant, what would we call those things? The wooden shacks that are on our streets now.
I think they call them sheds.
Sheds and enclosures.
I sent one to Alice last year that they actually collected rainwater and put it into a cistern off the side of it. And I think we could have I would love to ask the city to promote, if these are going to stay around for a while, that we turn them into artist innovation eco centers, so that, small level, you could see solar, wind, cisterns, education centers. I mean, I know the restaurants are paying for them, but they're taking up city streets. And I feel like those are like free billboards for how we can make the city better somehow. Anyway, that's a crazy thought. I'd love to hear more about the HAT study, what's happening on that front, and air quality. I'm worried about that. Let's see on my list if there's anything else. And then also I'd love to have an innovations around the world, which is kind of what Richard was saying as well, in terms of what are other cities doing right now. I'd love to hear about other projects in other cities and how we can adapt them here. So, because even I just recently went to Washington, D.C. at the Wharf, and they have a really great art installation there that physically shows, I think it's way more powerful than painting a lamppost that Battery Park has done. So anyway, that's a lot. Sorry.
Don't apologize. It's fabulous. I've taken copious notes, and yeah, I mean, I'm really eager to see more of this. We tend to get bogged down, as you know, in this committee with the sort of matters at hand of all these presentations by the various, city agencies, state agencies who, want to apprise us of their latest, resiliency measure or such. But these are critical topics, which I'm really eager to see more of. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I had one more crazy thought, and maybe this is a CB1 as a whole and not just for our committee, but I think we should have like an old fashioned lemonade stand, community board type of idea, that we take turns, a couple of us sitting out there, and whether it's near the ball fields or in a park or something like that, and just say, we're your community board one, and have our topics that we want to talk about, like on sandwich boards or posters or something like that, but say, we want to hear more from you. Like, I mean, I see this as more like physically present with like a lemonade stand, to say, to one, educate you about what we're doing, and then also to say, do you have any concerns? Now, I don't want to be yelled at on the street, which could happen, but I also think that would help get the word out if, we were more physically present. I mean, as all of you know, I stood in Battery Park more than one day and asked people for a half hour just walking by, do you know that Wagner Park's not going to be here come, September? I was, definitely embarrassed myself, but not one person that walked by knew what was coming.
Well, you know, Wendy, you raised a great point because it's the grassroots advocacy of the 50 members that have been appointed by the council member and the borough president to do exactly that, which is basically sort of to wear their placard and make all this stuff that we learn about known to the community at large. Now, I think this board has been pretty successful, certainly recently, in trying to get there. But the more we do of it, the better. So if it takes lemonade on a stand, I'll be out there with you. But you know, I think it's hard in COVID and all, but I 100% agree that that is a critical component, particularly I say this to the new board members, of what we're doing is getting the word out about whatever it is that's happening. And you know, I'm breathless over the whole Wagner Park fact that I remember 6 years ago, us screaming. And I remembered so many times saying in the whole full board, does anyone realize this means the end of the park? And nobody really seemed to pay attention until 6 years later. So I'm not sure how we, again, as we said earlier, or more effective, but whatever ways people have to do that, I applaud it. So thanks very much, Wendy. Sarah, hi, welcome. Sarah Cassell is our new Environmental Protection Committee member, and I'm delighted. So another Battery Park City resident. So Sarah, you're on mute though, and I love your floral decor behind you there.
Hi. I'm glad you like the floral decor because right actually behind my office chair is indeed my craft area, and it is packed with crap. So thus the yellow background. The increase in litter as you move from the Battery Park City Authorities areas to the rest of the city is it's disgusting. It drives me absolutely nuts. I realize that's not necessarily part of our purview, but maybe a litter drive we organize would be welcomed. I don't understand why the recycling is so difficult. I don't understand why. I don't understand. I just don't. I know that Gail Brewer sent out the newsletter today, and some area, probably hers, District 6, is getting trash pickup twice a day on the streets. And I think clearly we need even in the median of the highway, it's that concrete. The litter starts there on the median. So when you leave the Battery Park City Authorities area where they have people all the time, I rarely see sanitation. So thank you for bringing that up earlier. I look forward to hearing more about that, and also the air quality, because my allergies are horrible, and it's amazing. And I'm not allergic to pollen and things like that. So I'm confused about what's in the air at the moment. And I'm very glad to be part of this committee, and thank you.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Well, we look forward to having the Department of Sanitation. I would say that I know Pat Moore, the head of quality of life, has certainly gone after that sanitation situation, as well as, you know, some individuals in FIDI and different groups associated with the neighborhoods. So yes, look, I think it would be a great joint committee potentially with quality of life to, you know, but I think that's really important material. You're absolutely right.
And as I see construction work, I walk a lot. I'm a real estate broker, and I walk a lot. It's commercial, so I'm on the street looking at things, and the work that is being done, I rarely see inspectors out there, and there are all kinds of fumes and particles being released. It's everywhere, and I don't see city inspectors. I'm completely confused about the oversight. So I look forward to hearing more about this.
Yeah, accountability, really critical. Thank you so much. Great points. Tammy, our fearless leader, has joined us. Thanks very much. Tammy, what do you got?
So one of the things that is always very sort of conundruming to me is that we get individual organizations that pilot programs in small areas, here, there, everywhere. I see this most, you can see it very clearly where we have Earth Matters out on Governor's Island, which is an amazing local organization that supports us with composting. We have the Battery Park City Authority, who does 2 different types of composting themselves. Each gathers and organizes what is able to be composted differently, depending on their type of functionality, right? And then we have a third organization actually in Community Board 1, because there is composting being collected on a pilot program between a public-private partnership with the Downtown Alliance. So it would be a really interesting thing, because the goal I would love to see for CB1 is to expand composting from every edge of our district all the way up to Canal Street and be able to daisy chain it all, so we know that we can have composting in the district and that there are safe and easy places for it to be dropped off, and it becomes enmeshed in what we do as a society. And there are certainly enough corporations downtown that we can, if we need to do public-private partnerships with nonprofits in the city, that we can help broker these kinds of connections. I realize that the sanitation part of the picking up the compost is quality of life, but the understanding who's composting what and what materials go where and why, and the comparison of the 3 groups in our district who do it, I think would be really, I don't want to use the word compelling because it's kind of weird to say that about garbage and compost, but I think it's something really a really good education point that we could do to then find out where the symmetry is, to see how it could be scaled up and expanded. And then we could then lead that way and help the rest of Manhattan potentially get there. I do know in CB4, the Hudson River Park Trust, as Richard probably remembers, because we've had composting conversations on the Trust Advisory Council, they're doing composting as well. So really just trying to get everybody in the same, so it becomes innately ingrained in the future of the city, is really important. Otherwise, what we have seen in the past 10 years is composting start and composting stop, composting start and composting stop, because it's always related back to city budget. So the question becomes, who's composting what? How is it cost effective? Who's got a method? Maybe there's symmetry amongst all of them, and then look at forward. So that's one thing that's always sort of makes me scratch my head on, that I think environmental can really do a great job of education and understanding. And then the other part is, and I think everybody who knows me on this board knows me well enough to say, I detest diesel boats. It is the bane of my existence in Lower Manhattan. Everybody wants to live by the water, but nobody wants diesel fumes in their playgrounds. So where can we have and help promote the use of electric boats? This goes over towards transportation, I understand that, but we can never get to a point of having an electrified harbor until we get peers that are willing to support electric boats, and understanding from an environmental perspective what's needed from an infrastructure and how that positively impacts the climate and the neighborhoods, and what is the savings in the emissions between diesel and electric and different types of electric. And hearing from people who are the electric boat operators over on the West Coast, because I know there are several, might be a great way to push forward with this. It is something that EDC understands that we're looking for, but every time I see any new drawing of anything on the waterfront, it includes docks designed for diesel, not docks designed for electric. And I don't see why we don't have more electric. It's not like we live in Alaska or we live in Ithaca, New York, where it's only sunny 60 days a year, we have a lot of sunshine down here. We should be able to find ways to be able to harness the energy of the sun in a more effective way and use it for either the parks, just added electricity to lower our load and our footprints. So those are three things that I think from the Environmental Protection Committee are going to be super, super, super important. And the other thing I was wondering is the Port Authority and World Trade Center has done sampling in the Hudson because of their intake tubes. So maybe that might be an interesting conversation to have with them. And then lastly, a little more connection on the environmental front with the Hudson River Park Advisory Council and understanding about how the health department and the city view access into the water around all of CB1. Because I've been told many things about access. We looked at it for the pool that we wanted in CB1, which Wendy was a huge champion for. Plus pool, we didn't get it. That doesn't mean we still don't want it. We're looking at trying to get a shoreline over by the Brooklyn Bridge Park, and that will end up eventually leading to Brooklyn Bridge Manhattan. And understanding what makes the water viable, or whether or not we can ever have a point that we have beaches on the east and west side of the island. And some days it's some days it's you can go in the water and some days you can't. That's the way Florida operates. They put flags up for days that you can't go in the water for whatever reason. So I still don't understand why we can't have some kind of a system like that in New York, so we can actually get into the water. And I'm being told it's because the water's not safe.
Tammy, do you want to reopen the plus pool? Because I don't think they're getting very far up in the neighborhood where they are.
I'm happy to advocate for anything that gets people into the water, connected to the water. We live on an island and people don't even know that.
So one of the ways that all the members can be, going forward for the year to come is, all these fantastic suggestions, and I see a couple more hands, we're going to talk, but the more specific you can be to who you want to invite or what legislation you really want to highlight, or a resolution supporting legislation, or real proactive materials are so helpful, so we can really act on some of this. Because I think what we see as being reactive is generally not too helpful. So being proactive, you might get a shot. And, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming down the pike where we really have, or will have, I think, a voice. And specifically like the Climate Center on Governor's Island, that's, right around the corner to be revealed in September, I think it is. That's, or the finalist. That's an area where a lot of these things could come into play, doing it better. And a lot of legislative work that's going to be done. I just would ask that people follow up on these great suggestions and it not just disappear into the ether, and share with everybody on the committee. I assume everyone has their committee addresses. Let's invite so and so from such and such, and we can act on it. I mean, unfortunately, Diana won't be here to help us, but someone will. So I ask that folks do that where they can, because that's how it will happen. I see Vera. Hey there, Vera. Welcome. Question, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to unmute. The Green Amendment was just recently passed, and it's a state constitutional right that we have a right to clean air and water and a healthful environment. And I really would love to see how the various relevant agencies are taking this into consideration, as well as different advocacy groups. What are they doing with this amendment? I know it's new, but it's significant and relevant to what we're doing, and we'd love to see more about this.
Great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Richard.
Yeah, I got inspired by some of the things that Sarah and Tammy were saying, but also Wendy, in my building, we also got a D, and we thought we did everything right with new windows and conversion to the right to gas and oil and whatever it had to be done, and we got a D. It's very depressing. So yes, I think we have a big role to play. And I want to underscore what you were saying about communication. I think we've all been trying. We've got the newsletter goes out and we talk to people, but obviously your experience, your personal experience with Wagner Park and our experience recently with Wagner Park is a hard lesson learned, and we need to do other things. We just have to start to figure out better ways to reach out to the community, to communicate and to educate both. I think that's really important. Now, just it may not be part of our committee, or maybe it's joint committee, but the issue of these isolated programs. There's a program in sanitation in which they're putting large bins in the street for collection of trash. That is taking trash now off the streets and putting them into sealed bins. That's a pilot program. I don't know where it is, somewhere in Brooklyn, or I think it's somewhere in Brooklyn. That's the kind of thing that I think we should be exploring for our community. And it has to do with whose streets are they and what are we going to use them for? Is it just going to be for sheds? Is it just going to be whatever, And this is one of the things that I think needs to be considered in terms of how we use our street, and certainly not just for parking. And by the way, Tammy, swimming in the Hudson, it goes back to the CSO, to the combined sewage overflow. Part of the river project, I've known that if there's a 1/4 inch of rain within the last 2 days, you can't swim. You can't be in the Hudson. If there hasn't been a 1/4 inch of rain within the last 2 days, the Hudson is actually, in our area, is actually safe. But there is an overflow outlet right by Pier 25 or Pier 40. I forget, Pier 40. I think is where it is.
It's
There was
25.
also another one. Oh, there was a whole conversation because
There's a whole,
yeah, I
Right.
mean, we had it at the advisory council about overflow, but it does seem to me that we need to change the mindset of the city from you can't get in the water unless you're in a boat because the waters are all polluted to here are the opportunities for days that you can get in the water and we will flag it so people know.
right,
And that's not a mindset we have here.
right. That's just what was a little bit that I wanted to add to what I said earlier.
It's terrific. I mean, I guess while we're gonna wrap up here, other thoughts, please chime in or welcome. And, this can obviously continue. But one thing that comes to mind for me is having seen that town hall yesterday on the Battery Park City resiliency plans is how effective that can be. And I'm just wondering if we also want to advocate for on some of these very big issues, whether it's the Green Amendment or sanitation or stuff, to encourage our borough president and our council member to host these sorts of big ticket items as a town hall so that in fact, people will really hopefully find out about it. I don't know. I would love just 5 minutes on anyone's thoughts to follow up with ways you feel we could be more effective to get the word out, and using the example of Wagner Park that's before us. I don't know, but that was something that came to mind. Oh, Andrea, great. Hi. And
Hi. I think in terms of getting the word out, posting flyers and having posters, physical posters up in the local area, it really, it catches people's eyes. You can do a lot of internets, posts on the websites, but a lot of people, if they're not connected to the community board, you know, milieu, they don't really know that it even exists. So I mean, I found that, doing kind of local stuff in Chinatown, in my area, if I want to get the word out, putting actual physical posters and just handing out flyers it really, really spreads the word quite quickly and quite effectively.
Yeah, I have to say it's actually illegal to hang posters, flyers in Tribeca and Battery Park now because
Okay.
Tribeca used to do that. And I'm with you. The fact that you don't see any posters for Taste of Tribeca anymore, that's one of the reasons the city can fine you. And I disagree with that because I think they're very effective as well.
But you can, however, hand out flyers to folks. That you can do. Right. I mean, I remember during my POPs campaign years ago that I did that and it was quite effective. But
Right,
anyway, just saying, I think it's completely.
But again, I think that goes back to a question, Alice. We are all volunteers.
Yes. Oh, I'm not saying, of course, right.
And the office is a tiny office, sadly about to be even smaller. Unless, of course, we can tie Diana to the desk and keep her forever, which would have been my choice.
But the point is well taken that individuals, again, who are been selected to be on the board can do some work on, obviously on things that are dear to their own hearts, like what is being described by Andrea. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, and who cares? You put up a little sign late at night, no one's going to know. But it is an approach. I agree with you. Thanks. Bob?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my thoughts include things like I got there late because I of course had one of many medical appointments, but I'm on the way home from that. And so I often think about local law 97. It sounds like you hit on that, but I think that there's a lot of principles and engineering behind it, and there's a lot of thinking in the legislation about it. So I think there's a lot to learn and teach. Another thing I'm pretty involved with right now is did green markets come up at all?
Not yet.
Okay, I think that right now the Fulton Stroll market is in a lot of trouble, and they represent the whole idea of working with nature, working with farmers. There's some very good economic possibilities for the city in getting going with something a little bit like Reading Market in Philadelphia, which I think is possible. And then I think the greening of roofs and all of the technology of kind of local farming as much as possible in the city. To the extent that in southern Manhattan, where we are, we can have more gardens, even look for even times when we have spaces that are free for a long period of time. We really, if it's possible, to think through how to make that even into short-term gardens to make them beautiful. There's whole issues about food deserts, about finding ways to work with kids to develop little green markets based on the Fulton Stroll market kind of base. So the Fulton Stroll market is actually training kids to kind of work with healthy food and to bring that food into their communities all over the city. I think that's an important thing. I think that it's really important to teach people about good diet and about what to eat. I think those kinds of issues are really important, and and it's possible to push that kind of knowledge out. Another kind of general area that I'm involved with and have been involved with for a while, that you might have mentioned things like Passive House. Did that come up?
But not tonight. We, as you know, we
Okay, so
hosted
Passive
them.
House,
Yeah.
Passive House is one approach to a kind of ecological engineering. And one of the reasons why working with things like Local Law 97 are difficult is because people don't have enough basic knowledge about how ecological buildings work and why they work. And so I went around at one point and went to every community board in Manhattan, and we actually sold the idea of Bandera Verde, if you've ever heard of that, between 111th
Yeah, Bob,
Street.
you remember we actually supported your efforts
Oh,
there, and
absolutely.
yeah, and we had Pastor
And so
Thomas
what
speak
I'm
to us.
saying
Yeah,
is that we have to do things like that downtown, and that the issue of building those kinds of structures and those kinds of development and building them to eco standards using principles like passive house are really important. And so I could get together people that can easily teach the principles of that kind of engineering, and teach people, kind of how that kind of thinking and approach works with things like local law 97. I think that's an important thing. I think somehow or another we learn so much. Even with something like 250, we're surrounded by schools there, so there's really an excellent opportunity. Just one thing I'm more often concerned with is the lack of teaching and knowledge about principles in science. So there is a kind of natural gateway between the schools that surround that space, and also when the archaeologist comes, there's lots of opportunities for engagement with young people, and I think that uh, is always a fruitful opportunity. And I think,
100%, yeah.
and I've been working on ferries a lot, and there was before the transportation committee a proposal for a ferry between Manhattan, between Pier 17 and Elizabeth. And we've researched this out pretty carefully, and it looks like ferries aren't ready for prime time yet, and we really don't have the battery power in ferries, and in San Francisco Bay, there are organizations that claim they have net zero electric ferries, but when you research them, they don't. And
Right.
they say on their websites that they're petroleum driven. So I'm watching carefully for. Of course, there are electric ferries in places like Norway. The only one that works in the United States is a little river crossing in Alabama.
Well,
That's the
right.
only one we have. So
Wow.
anyway, that's an area of interest, but I don't think it's ready for prime time, and I hope that one of my ideas hits somebody as useful.
They were all very useful. They're terrific, and I thank you. I thank everybody. This was a good momentary exercise, and I think we have a year's worth of things to explore without the support of Diana. I do want to remind everyone that there are numerous committees that can look at some of these issues in addition to environmental protection, like quality of life, like transportation, waterfront and parks. So hopefully between us all in the year to come, we're going to cover a little more ground and a little bit more proactively. I think I can, unless anybody else has anything they'd like to add or just, cordially say here.
I'm just going to give a shout out that if anybody knows somebody who would like to work at a fantastically active, vibrant community board with land use experience, please have them contact the office. Diana is fairly irreplaceable, I will say that. But if you know somebody, speak up.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
point.
there's somebody that just got hired by the EDC, I think we could go after.
Yeah,
See if we
she's
can
pretty
compete
awesome.
on the salary. Right. Wow. Well, any last comments, Diana? I also see Rosa and Francis have joined us, and thanks so much. If you have anything to add, let us know. I don't see anybody. Anyway, I can't wait till we sort of meet in person a little bit so we can see each other again. But anything else, or do I say like a big hip hip hooray to Diana, hand waving?
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm starting to feel extremely sentimental. I will certainly miss working with all of you.
You better be here in July.
We are, if everybody saw my email out, we are virtual through July at this point, but either the Monday or Wednesday surrounding full board pending availability, we're gonna try and do a get together in person and do a proper send off for Diana, because you can't let somebody who's been with us for so long go away without an in person. Wear your masks, bring your own wallets. It'll be BYO, but it'll be for Diana. So
Terrific. Oh, I'm delighted. That's good to hear. Well, all right, everybody, signing off. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks,
Great to
everyone.
see you.
Bye.
Bye.